Simplifying expressions. When simplifying equations, remember that there is always a 1 in front of a parentheses that has no number. And then there's always a 1 in front of a variable that has no number. And then it's always important to always use order of operations when simplifying. And remember, distributed property falls into the multiplication step. So let's look at the first example. Solve for the following. So what we can do is we would first look inside the parentheses. As we remember, the please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So the first step is to deal with the parentheses. So we look inside both the parentheses and see that they are simplified, as we don't have two x's that we can add together or two y's that we can combine together inside them. So we would leave it as is, and we would say that we are done with the first step of the order of operations. Then we look at exponents. We see we don't have any, so that's also done. Now we know we need to do multiplication or division, and we know distributed property falls into the multiplication step. So we can go ahead and take this 4 and multiply by each term inside. So let's deal with the first term, 4 times 1x. 4 times 1 is 4, and then we have x. 4 times 5 is 20, and then we have it as y for the variable, and then 4 times 1 is 4, and we have a negative sign in front of it. So we can now leave that inside parentheses. Now, when we multiply then this 3, we need to see that there's that negative sign. So we're going to multiply each term inside the parentheses by this negative 3. So we multiply by the 3 terms inside. So when we do that, we can just put the plus sign because we're going to distribute the negative sign. So we have negative 3 times x. So that's minus 3x. Negative 3 times 2 is minus 6. And then this negative 3 times this negative 5 is then positive 15y. Now we've dealt with this multiplication step, and so the only thing we'd have to do is add and subtract. And so we will need to combine like terms, like we've done before. So these are the same. We can add those together. We have a y and a y here, so we can add those together. And then we can go ahead and add these together. So let's deal with the x's first. So we have 4x minus 3x. So that's just equal to 1x, because 4 minus 3 is 1, and we leave the variable. Then we have this 20y plus 15y. So 20 plus 15 is 35, and that's y. And then we have this negative 4 minus 6. So what we're really doing is just adding to these numbers, 4 plus 6, which is 10, but they're both negative, so we can remember the negative sign in front of it. And this would be our simplified version of our solution. Now let's look at another example. Solve for the following. So once again, we have this 2, we're going to multiply by each term inside, as both parentheses are already simplified as is. Then on the second one, remember that anything that in front of the parentheses is really just a 1 if there is no number. Now we can go ahead and start solving. So let's deal with the first parentheses. So we have this 2 times this 3x squared. So 2 times 3 is 6, and this is x squared. 2 times 5 is 10. And then we have it as x, and we have a negative sign right there. 2 times 2 is 4. We'll leave this in the parentheses. Then we have a negative 1, and we're going to multiply it by the 3 terms inside. So negative 1 times 2, that's negative 2x squared. Negative 1 times 5 is negative 5x. And negative 1 times 7 is negative 7. Now we need to go ahead and add like terms. We see we have an x squared here and an x squared here. We can combine those. We can combine this 10x with this 5x. And then we have just two numbers that we can combine. So let's deal with the x squared first. So we have 6x squared minus 2x squared, or plus negative 2x squared. So that would just be equal to 4x squared. Next, we deal with this minus 10x minus 5x. Really, all we're doing is we're adding 10 plus 5, so that's 15, but remember the minus sign, and it's x is the variable. Next, we have 4 minus 7. Another way to do that is just going 7 minus 4, which is 3, but we're going to keep the sign of the larger number, so that's the negative 7. So this would be our solution.